Good morning.
Good afternoon.
Welcome back to Tipsy Casting. I'm Jen, and this is my co-host Jess. Thank you all so much for tuning in again this week. We are excited to welcome actor and author Neal Bledsoe to Tipsy Casting. Neal is an actor and writer from Seattle. He is perhaps best known for his work on the small screen, including Shameless, Man in the High Castle, Ugly Betty, Smash, The Mysteries of Laura, and many more, including The Odd Turn as a Hallmark print. On the big screen, he has received several awards for his work in independent cinema.
He is also a journalist whose work has appeared in the pages of Sports Illustrated, Men's Health, and Variety, and is currently writing a series of profiles about the lives of those who labor in today's entertainment industry. He is a proud graduate of UNCSA and a member of the Actors Center. He splits his time between LA and NYC, and despite what the internet says, he is not actually from Canada. He was only born there.
Now grab a cocktail.
Or a mocktail.
And enjoy.
Hi, Neal. How are you?
On strike.
On strike. That sounds right.
I'm good, all things considered. I'm dealing, like we all are, with a very uncertain industry at a very uncertain time. So
yeah,
I remain very hopeful, though.
Well, that's what we're here to talk about, and
we're here to drink.
Well, that too. Let's start there. What are you drinking, Neal?
I'm drinking an impromptu, a mezcal, orange juice, and topped off with a little spritz of Waterloo black cherry.
That sounds very delicious.
Jess, what are you drinking?
Oh. I'm drinking some leftover Sauvignon Blanc from the bowl from last night. I opened a bottle and here we are.
Oh, from the Hollywood Bowl.
Yes.
Is like a fish bowl. Have you heard of fish bowls where you get the fish ones? Jess, you partier.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Started this morning, couldn't finish it, so here we are.
Yeah. Got some triple stuff in there.
Sorry, clarification. Yeah. The Hollywood Bowl last night was Sondheim night. Or no, that was 2 nights ago. Still have the bottle halfway done. This will finish it off.
Nice.
What about you, Jen?
I have a gin and tonic with pink gin tonight, which is very exciting. Pink gin. Didn't know it was a thing.
Oh, yeah. You can find any flavor in gin is what I've learned in the last year.
But any color of gin, I think. I've seen a lot of lavender gin.
Yes, it's the indigo,
really?
Which if anybody didn't know, Snoop Dogg has a line of indigo gin if you're interested.
Really?
It's pretty delightful.
It's blue like the Crips.
Maybe that was his inspiration.
I mean, that must be, right? You saw him wearing gang colors when he was wore a full-on Crip outfit at the Super Bowl.
Oh, I guess I didn't connect the dots at the time.
I was like, way to go, Snoop. Just representing for Long Beach. Do it.
Yeah. Amazing. Oh my goodness. So past our cocktails today, thank you for joining us. There has been a lot of rhetoric about relating to actors and casting, with it being the thick of the double strike right now. But I don't think our two professions are necessarily communicating with one another sort of openly. So I feel like it's important to do that because, there's been a lot of communication and maybe not.
Well, it seems like you've been quite vocal about it, to be fair. You've written articles. You've been pretty outspoken about your opinions on it.
You mean me, Jen?
Yeah.
Oh,
yes.
perfect.
Yes.
I don't know if that was necessarily an opinion piece or was even trying to be or advocating a certain position or a certain fix within the industry. What I was attempting to do was really examine the complicated problem of it from a 30,000-foot view. And many times this discussion gets bogged down either in access or unfairness or historical recriminations of feeling like actors have never trusted casting or actors have always trusted casting. It always gets down into the anecdote and personal. And what I was really attempting to do is examine it from an economic angle. and examined some of the changes that had been happening within the industry that I had felt for a very, very long time, that kind of made me go like, well, what's happening here? And how is this kind of related to this relationship and this conversation between casting and acting? And I definitely felt this shift to self-taping in my own career as much as anybody else did. And the thing that I would always kind of get back to is that, well, this is as much an economic story as it is an artistic story. I think, like a lot of us, all of us really kind of dove headfirst into self-taping during the depths of the pandemic without really thinking about the consequences of it, right? That there was that that moment, it really seemed like a godsend that we were able to participate and we were able to do this thing that was going to keep the business going. And at that moment, there was a medical reason that we could not be in the same room with one another. That when that started to change, the follow-on of the business did not change. We did not go back to kind of a normal or even a hybrid model. And instead, many times we would use the scale or the convenience that brought as the reason to keep it. And many times people had moved away and made it physically impossible to be in the same room. And so you needed that kind of, you needed the convenience. It became yet another example of remote working, right? So what I think that did, and what I was trying to kind of like get at, not in opinion, but really through the data of it, is how did that affect wages? How did that affect the number of actors? How does the growing number of actors affect wages? I think one of the real hidden things that we're seeing within this strike is, and it's something that the two unions, the WGA and SAG, are probably loath to talk about, is in 2022, more money went in actors' pockets and writers' pockets than ever. And this isn't like anecdote. This is the WGA's own facts and figures put this out. Nobody reported it, but this is the WGA's stats. More money went into the contributions of the WGA in 2022 than ever before. I think I saw another figure that 6,000 writers were writing within the WGA in that given year, up from 4,500 in 2019 or 2018. So there has been a tremendous boom in this industry, but it is and that's something that technology, through streaming, through this kind of accessibility, through our interface and medium, all of that has enabled it. But it has also had a converse effect at driving down wages. And that was something that I was really interested in. And I know one of the facts and figures that you would ask me about, Jessica, was how did I come up with the metric of the 250 million, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah, that seemed quite excessive when I read that article.
And why?
Well, I guess I think a part of it was the framing of it in the sort of paragraph that it was in. It was saying that actors are taking on annually $250 million because we are no longer hiring readers, was like the framing of where that number came from. Mm-hmm. So a big part of that conversation is, one, there are very few casting offices that actually hired readers prior to COVID, and probably during COVID we were doing everything remotely via Zoom. And, when I think Jen and I would always have my associate read, unless there was an actor who wanted to come in and have like the casting experience and getting that information of like being on the other side of the table and understanding what the casting process looks like. Then an actor would come in and assist, like almost volunteer, but like I would take care of their meal or whatever it is. There was no formal hiring of readers. I know that we sort of had a sidebar conversation of where that number came from. So if you want to break it down, because I also feel like it felt a little bit like apples and oranges, but I want to hear sort of the breakdown of it from your side of things.
Sure. So the breakdown that I attempted to, and as we had a sidebar about it, it is admittedly an imperfect number, but it is an estimation of trying to calculate the labor and the cost of that labor. And that labor isn't free. And even if you would say, Jen, that number is excessive, it doesn't make it free, right? Like you have shifted And even in your example, Jessica, of having an actor who wanted to learn the process, or having an associate do that work, that is not the responsibility of the actor who's auditioning to find that work. So but the part of the insidious shift to self-taping has been to get other people to do that work for free. Or you create an economy where actors feel compelled to pay for that other person. And so that has become an economic shift, and the burden has shifted to the actors. So how I arrived at that figure was, I took the SAG estimate of how many people they thought were going in for roles, which was approximately 100, or making tapes for something. Then I gave everybody an hour, because realistically, you can say that you're having people in and out and in 15 minutes, but that's just not the reality of it. That person is sitting there rehearsing with you. They're there for an hour, whether that's a coach, and coaches are paid by the hour. They're not paid by the 15 minutes, right? Or that's a friend or a family member who's sitting there with you for that hour. Then the way I calculated the 100 actors per role times the average number of episodes of television, which is about 10 these days. And then I took the average number of roles, which again was an approximation at about 10. And so by that kind of value, and then I times that by the starting wage of an associate, which is a number I got from one of your colleagues, which would be about $35 an hour. And that just and then I times that by the number of TV shows, which is 599, but I just rounded it up to 600. So that's how I came up with the $250 million. Yeah. And as you can see, that actually is like, it might actually be a low end, Jen, because I'm not taking into effect films. I'm not taking into effect video games. I'm not taking into effect commercials. And those are all part and parcel with this self-tape industry. So, and it
let
is
me
not
interject there really quick. So,
well,
because
let
here's
me just finish.
Okay.
It's not just it is an imperfect calculation, but it is an attempt to come up with a value for the shift in labor. Does that make sense?
It does.
Yes.
I'm not
However, I do
a little bit.
Go ahead, Jen. You go, Jen.
Because while I understand your opinion of like that's what it's valued at, the way it was worded in the article, and maybe it wasn't intended that way, but it made it seem like studios were saving $250 million, which is where I think that's excessive, because I don't think that's true. Because even if Jess has used actors or people in the past, I've never once, like, it's always been either myself reading or an associate. I've never once paid an actor to come in, asked an actor to come in, done anything else. Maybe a director wanted to read with them personally, and that would be on them. So that's never been an expense in terms of like an outside thing. And I think it's something where it's a bit misleading because if you're saying that studios are saving $250 million and pretty much inferring that you're now putting that full cost onto actors, I think I think a little bit of the problem with self-tapes, and it's very well documented in our podcast that Jess and I are not a fan of the self-tape culture. We're very much in pro going back into person and being back in the room and whatnot. But actors tend to overthink a lot of these things. And I know some very rare instances of casting offices, mostly commercially, are asking for maybe extraordinary things for actors to do. The majority of casting offices aren't. And it's like, so we, to say that like we would put all this, if we had $250 million to put towards actors auditioning, is just not the case. And I think actors tend to, especially in the self-tape culture, think that they need all this stuff. And it's like they think they're being asked to do all this, when in reality, it doesn't take an hour to do an audition. And it doesn't take all this fancy equipment and all this time and effort that maybe you're putting in some of your calculations, which is where I think it's a bit exorbitant, because the majority of actors prior to this situation would never have had an hour in a tape room. I don't know. I could never tell you one time, maybe even a test situation, that we would give an hour to an actor to do something. So if
Of
they're
course.
spending time and money on a coach or time in an actual room with somebody to pay that, I think that first and foremost is a big mistake on an actor's part, because if you need that much time, then I think you need to evaluate your auditioning process. And I've had this conversation with many actors where they're like, well, now I'm getting into this situation where I'm putting myself on tape 10 times. And I don't think that's healthy, to be fair, because you're never going to have 10 times on set to do it. So I think there's maybe a bit of I guess that's where I'm coming from with, I think that's a bit of a high number, because I think a lot of that background is just not quite valid.
Jessica, did you want to say something as well?
Yeah, I think a part of it for me is also in terms of sort of the savings reframing is that, there's the studio, and I'm not on the AMPTP side. I just want to clarify that, like, I support actors fully and SAG and AFTRA. But just this notion, like, they're still hiring the associates, that hourly rate, that's why it feels a little bit of apples and oranges for me, because our support staff, our volume is definitely increased because the expectations are higher on your end and on ours in terms of the number of self-tape requests that are being put out there. But those are expectations that are being put on us as well, even though our support staff is staying the same. As far as, like, obviously these are valid things that actors are experiencing, this, like, not to take away from that experience. But, I think in terms, because everybody, once your Variety article came out, I think, especially with the Auditions Our Work campaign, like, everybody was clinging to that number, saying that is the literal number that is being taken out of their pockets in terms of timing. And I feel like that again, these are requests that are not, I think this comes down to the fact that, like, again, as a community, we are not communicating transparently within, not just with actors and casting directors, but actors and agents and casting directors, who are, when we are not necessarily asking for specific quality levels or whatever the X, Y, and Z are, agents are putting that on their performers, on their talent. And that is, again, not coming from us. It's the same way that agents started telling their talent that, like, the most important thing that you should focus on is social media following. And that is not necessarily something that came from casting.
Yeah. And I hear all that. And thank you very much for that perspective, guys. And I don't agree that this is a number that should be used as a cudgel against casting, as if this is something that is going into casting's pockets that should otherwise go into actors' pockets. For the record, I'm not pro self-tape pay audition, or even audition pay. I think the detrimental effect it's not that I don't believe that auditions are work. I mean, I've been auditioning for nearly 20 years of my life, and, like, it is where I get better as an actor. It's something that I've learned to love, and I love it better in the room, to be fully transparent. But it is not something that I feel as if I'm entitled to payment of. I think that is a very generous reading of the 1937 overall over whatever the overall SAG agreement is. I think it would have a huge detrimental effect on the auditioning community. So I want to just get that out of the way. But Jen, to your point, even if that is, let's say that, just for instance, that I overestimated in the hour, to use your example, and saying that if an actor is spending an hour on something, is 15 minutes for an audition? Is that a reasonable amount of time? And if you're
maybe a callback.
Well, I mean, look, if you're an actor and you're going into a room, you shoot the shit for. I have not been in an audition where I have not at least, like, shot the breeze for, like, 5 minutes, and then you do your scenes once.
I would say for, like, a major role, like a lead or a series regular, it'd be like 1 or 2 every 10 minutes is usually what we would schedule, kind of standardly.
1 or 2 every 10 minutes?
Yeah.
I would say 15 minutes.
Yeah. So, I mean, like, if you've got 1 or 2 every 10 minutes.
But I also was never in office that, like, made you read 10 pages. So
if you have 10 pages of sides, or if you even have 5 pages of sides, it's about a minute per page. stage, right? So like right there is like, that's 5 minutes of your time, right? And if you're going to do it twice, that's 10 minutes of your time. If you're going to say hello, you're going to put your stuff down, you're going to say goodbye, you got another actor coming in, that's 15 minutes right there. I don't think that is a huge over exaggeration of the time. I think if you're getting 2 actors for a major role in every 10 minutes, you are moving with a dazzling amount of efficiency. But my point is this: let's say I overestimated the number of an hour, right? Even still, even if it's 15 minutes, that's 62.5 million, right? And even if you're the other quibble that I heard is that you're not hiring the actor, or you're not having the associate read. Well, then it's a value of your own time. Mm-hmm. What my point is you are offloading that cost not to the auditioning actor. This isn't about the auditioning actor. This is to somebody who has no skin in the game whatsoever. This is somebody who doesn't stand to materially benefit whatsoever, and you're relying on that labor for free. And that has a value. If it's not 250 million, is it 125? Is it 62.5? I mean, we can keep scaling this up, and we can keep having people audition ad infinitum and keep giving them opportunities, but that comes at a cost from people that don't stand to materially benefit whatsoever. And that's my point. And I'll just be clear as well, because I do think that the framing of that figure is important. So where I wrote that came at the second half, where I was actually talking about the increased cost on casting directors. So the budget crunch during COVID didn't help matters. One source explains that before the pandemic, offices that once cost $10,000 per month to rent have fallen to a measly $800 stipend. Casting directors are now responsible for buying their own equipment, including Zoom accounts. Quote, everybody's operating from a place of fear, one notes. Self-tapes are a huge money saver for production companies. By simply outsourcing the task of reading with actors to the actors themselves, they save an estimated $250 million annually. So to put that into context, what I was actually talking about was the squeeze that was happening with casting directors and how this is kind of affecting both of these communities. And you can take issue with the imperfect estimation of it, but then I would ask you, like, well, what is the value of that? If it's not 250 million, well, what is it? If you're going to have thousands upon thousands upon thousands of people auditioning for you, and they're doing that willingly because they stand to gain something. They all have those dreams of winning an Oscar in their head. But what about the people that are doing that as a favor? What about the people that are doing that for free? Is like, like when self-tapes really first started, I was in Brooklyn and I was living during the midst of COVID. I was living with a girlfriend in a 1-bedroom apartment, and we had to navigate that stuff. I mean, it's also kind of like dangerous in a way, because like, A, I don't want her for my own artistic process. I don't want her in the apartment while I'm doing it. And B, it's kind of like, it's a little dangerous for me to send me out, or for me to send her out. So the whole thing has a cost. And also, when I ask her to tape with me, that's not her job. And we're making it the job of third parties that have nothing to do with that. And that is an efficiency that, like it or not, has been passed along to actors.
I think this, obviously things have changed in terms of the volume in which this is happening. That's maybe the big argument, but this experience did not start with COVID. Like, this experience was, self-tapes. I can't tell you how many times people, like, I would schedule actors and then they would default to self-tapes because they didn't want to come in, or they didn't. First and foremost, again, we talk about it all the time. We definitely want to be in person or offer hybrids to actors. But I think it's that same version that we sort of defaulting to. If we could go back to what it was prior to COVID, where actors had the choice, because everybody thrives in a different environment. Mm-hmm. There are a lot of actors who I talk to that don't want to go back in person, that they want to continue. And so I think because there's such an imbalance within your own community and ours, I will say, in terms of being in person, there is a lack of clarity on which direction we move in. And not to say there's no value, or that the people that are on the other side, that are the readers, don't have value in their time. Obviously, they have no gains. But I think the big part of it is that we, this is something that has always existed. And I think within, not always, just prior to COVID, we as a community, when self-tapes became the only version of being, auditioning, I think we required less of actors. We didn't want them to go out of their homes. We, giving people the opportunity to do virtual or pre-recorded on the other side, having you record your own, other side of the dialogue and then do your own scene. This wine is kicking in faster than I expected, guys. But I think not to take away from the actor's experience and the amount of time and energy that it goes into preparation on that side and finding the resources to prepare the audition. But those are things that have existed since prior to the pandemic. I think the big question that, that is the biggest topic is like, people had to move out of Los Angeles. We just spoke to Amanda Doyle, who had to move to Atlanta because she couldn't survive like the financial burden of like the cost of living in Los Angeles. And I'm sure it's the same thing in New York, where that's like the really big conversation of, what is happening here, that people can, like, casting directors have left, clearly by Jen, leaving Los Angeles and major cities in order to be able to continue the audition process and the casting process on their own side of things.
Sure. A couple things, though. One is the major point is, and I agree with you that this is not something that is brand new. The point is it's become uniform.
Right.
And there is no escaping it. Whether you remain in this city or not, you're still self-taping. The other point is, like, even if this existed before, that's still a cost of labor. And I ask you guys again, if it's not that number, what is it? How much is that time worth? Because it is being done for free. And if you're going to keep scaling it up, it's going to keep being done for free. And if you have a problem with that number, then I'd ask you to come up with your own.
Yeah. So here's my response to that. Yeah. So, I mean, here's the thing. And again, we kind of talked about this in a previous episode, but like, I understand that. And I am a big proponent of everyone's time is worth something. But I also think because of the industry we work in, that every department across the board makes sacrifices and works for free in some respect. Because we have always said that for us to get a job as casting directors, we spend time making lists, watching TV shows, going through like reels and stuff to prepare ourselves so that we can go in to impress a producer or director. And while we put hours into that kind of preparation, we don't get paid for it. We don't get, it's all based on, well, we hope we get paid if we get the job. And I would say maybe more times than not, we don't get the job. So we're never really compensated for that time or effort. And I know there are like, art department or set, whatever people, production designers who make sketches and storyboardists and directors, and everyone kind of puts in this time. And so there's part of me that's like, I get what you're saying, and I'm not saying that it's not worth something. And I agree that it's a problem that it's become a uniform thing. However, I mean, I have happily read with many friends. I put actors on tape for free all the time who need to. I live with an actress and I help her with her self-tapes. And I've never seen it as a burden, because I think it's something where, because of the industry that we're in, it's a sacrifice that all of us have to make. Like, I don't expect that she's going to pay me $25 to sit there and help her read for an hour and give her notes. And I mean, to her credit, I think she gets a little bit of a good deal that she lives with a casting director, but I could give her that kind of instant feedback. But it's something that I think I understand that time is always worth something. And like I said, I'm a huge proponent of knowing your value and owning that, because I don't think people should work for free. I think auditioning is a very different situation. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Jen, I just want to interject, though, because like I think this gets to the crux of what we're talking about. I agree with you that we all do work for free. I agree with you that that production designers, directors, I mean, that was part of the DGA's deal, right? Is that they wanted to get paid for a lot of pre-production work. All of us are doing an enormous amount of work for free. My point is not about people within the industry. My point is about people on the outside of the industry that are doing work for free for the industry. And I think there's a crucial difference there.
I don't know. I get what you're saying. Like if you're asking your mom to read with you, like is her time, is that what you're saying? Like if you're asking for people outside the industry to
Yes,
help you?
precisely.
Okay, so
Precisely. Precisely. To your point, everybody's doing work for free. You're watching innumerous amounts of television shows and movies in preparation of doing things that are in the hopes that you'll get a job for which you will materially gain. Do I have that right?
Correct.
Okay. Jessica, how am I doing? Okay.
Right on.
So that is absolutely describes the actor's auditioning process to a T, does it not? We are doing an enormous amount of work for free in the hopes that we'll get a job and materially gain from that. The figure that by scaling up self-tapes are people outside of that don't stand to materially gain whatsoever. And whether that's a mom or a friend or a roommate or anybody, that's work that's being done for free. And that's not just, and if we're going to continually rely on free favors as an entire industry, well, that has a cost, and that does have a value. And we can kind of shrug it off and say like, well, it's kind of been that way, and so it's just more of that way now. But that's pretty insidious. I mean, at what point do we start working for free? I mean, that has a cost. And all I'm asking you guys to do is like, if you find fault with the number that I've provided, what would the number be?
Well, we don't have it right now, but maybe we will come back to you with that.
And I look, guys, I'm not trying to advocate like, I'm not even blaming your side of it. I understand. And what I tried to point at in my article in Variety, or even when I spoke to the LA Times, was like, there is an economic squeeze here that is affecting all of us. But this is something that has been passed along to actors. And if this was just my opinion, if this was just something that I was making up, or that a bunch of like disaffected, grumpy actors that liked the olden days, this wouldn't have become one of the SAG's issues in the room. I mean, this was a central part of the bargaining strategy. This is obviously a problem for enough members that it needs to get resolved with the AMPTP.
Can I ask a question?
Please.
As far as the sort of central point of the conversation goes on the actor side of thing, because there's been so many aspects of, that the actors feel that they have to go to coaching. Actors feel like they have to go to studios to I think there's so many different subsections to this self-taping conversation. And, we talk about, we don't talk about CSA a lot, but we did talk about it in our last episode of like the conversation that like our organizations don't want to get involved in like the minutia of how we function. And so there's no like self-tape best practices. There's not that uniform thing where we are as a collective telling you, we don't need the bells and whistles. We don't need you to go to coaching. If you feel like you need to go coaching to get to your best version of it, then, you do you. But, or even like if you are a parent and your children are running around and there's not enough, if you can't self-tape in your own home, like you do whatever you need in order to get to the best place for yourself, right? So those are the versions that I can understand people sort of outsourcing and going onto all these places. But like during when the whole Betty May fiasco happened, like I went on my website and I wrote up best practices for self-tapes. Like this is like bare bones. This is all you need. We don't need anything fancy. We're not requiring anything. So I feel like a lot of the frustration is that because there's lack of communication from one side to the other, from casting directors to actors, and that we are not necessarily actors are being told so many things from everybody else, from Breakdown Express, from their agents and managers of like what you need to pay for and all of these things, that there's a lot of bottled up frustration that is spilling over into these conversations.
Mm-hmm. What, Jessica, a question there? I agree with everything you said.
No. I feel like no,
sister.
I don't think it's necessarily a question, but I feel like that, like the central point of the conversation, whether it's like the reader aspect of it, that it maybe is not it's not the most focus on the reader aspect. I think it's the most of it is like, because everything is being added on one on top of the other, and like this understanding from actors of what they think they need versus what we're actually asking for.
Right.
That, they feel like they have to go above and beyond, when it's really like I talked about in our last episode, like Benedict Cumberbatch did a self-tape before he was like, he was on Sherlock, but nobody really over here knew who he was. And he did it at his friend's kitchen table and got con. Like, nobody is asking for bells and whistles for the most part, but I think it's a level of frustration that's building up into these other areas.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. What I would add to that is I don't think there are no best practices and there are no standardizations, and every casting office has a different set of guidelines for which they ask you to follow. But I'll give you a glaring example of how actors just kind of disregard a note like that if it comes in an audition sheet. If you see an audition sheet that says, actors, you are not required to memorize your lines. It is totally okay if you have your pages in your hands. Every single actor worth their salt will disregard that and go, well, there's a fucking trap. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to memorize my lines. And you might not need to. You could just sit there and read them. And I've been a reader. I was a reader for years and years and years. It tells you one of the best auditions I ever saw was an older actor came in, was reading a play. I think it was Equus, and he was coming in to play the father. And he sat maybe 5 inches from me and just read it. And it was so present and so that's a moment. I can absolutely see that. But how many actors now won't see things like that because they're not in the room and they have no clue. They have zero clue of how to do this. And so in the absolute vacuum that this creates, whether every office has a different set of standards, where every manager and agent is telling them something different, where every friend is telling them something different, where lighting absolutely makes a difference. If I have a glaring white spotlight in my eyes versus some shiny great ring light, or even to use the Betty May example, their Storm LED lights, like if that is going to be a sales tactic, then they're also saying that matters. And I think that either consciously or unconsciously, and what we're talking about is what the actors are picking up on. And I think they're in the absolute vacuum of information, they're making shit up as they go along, right? And so they're spending an hour. I remember to your point, Jessica, about this like happening for years and years and years. I remember helping a friend of mine on a self-tape in New York. I must have been there, and this guy was getting all sorts of like bad feedback from his manager, and the manager was like he'd sent in the tape to her earlier, and this was just some parasitic bottom feeder manager that had some weird sort of dominant submissive relationship with her client, and kept telling him his tapes weren't good enough. And I was watching my friend beat himself up. I must have been with him for like 8 hours while we went over 2 scenes, and and he kept going back to watch the tape. He's like, okay. I want to go in and I want to do this. And I want to change this. It's like, he is doing that almost for somebody else that has nothing to do with the casting process. And this is also part of the problem. Part of the other like huge change that self-tapes have enabled is the first arbiter of our excellence in terms of our artistic expression isn't you guys anymore. It's our agents and managers. They're the first people that are watching this. And how does that not deviate towards a norm? How does that not go as like, well, like if I'm Gersh, I've got my clients to just kind of, if I'm innovative, I need everybody to look really fucking shiny. Like it is absolutely going to have an effect, good or bad. And there are plenty of good things about self-taping. Let's be clear. But there are all a tremendous amount of consequences. And I think those also demand examination to go like, well, is this truly better? And as far as like, what were the advantages to, and I want to get into the AI thing as well, because I think this plays into it. What are the advantages of doing it in the room? What is just the simple, most straightforward advantage to doing it in the room? You're talking to the casting director and you have a uniform taping experience. That is like, first and foremost, that is just the most straight away advantage to doing it. Then nobody's thinking that they have to run out and buy a $5,000 camera. Nobody's thinking they've got to spend an hour. Jen, you can stop them after, you can get an actor in there, 2 actors every 10 minutes. But like and crucially too, I think, guys, it enables us to collaborate. And that is what we don't get to do anymore. We're so remote. We're so removed from one another that is removing the art of what we do together. It is removing you guys from being our advocates. Or if you are, we don't see it and we don't trust it, because now our first and like our frontline advocates are our agents and our managers. And I'm really, really lucky, and I know I am, because my agents and my managers always respond to my tapes. And I know they always watch my tapes, because like if I shit the bed, they'll give me the note and they'll say, hey, do that again. And I'll trust them. And we've earned that. But do you know the amount of actors that are dealing with agents that are throwing shit at a wall? And I guess that I know this is totally, but this is a change that has happened because of this. And it needs looking at.
Absolutely. I mean, we are totally in line with you on that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I want to address 2 things you said. So one, because we use this forum to get like our voices out there and like what we want actors to understand, is that I get where you're coming from. And I just want actors to understand that, like, as much as you go over this, and again, I've learned more living with an actor than I have probably in 15 years of casting of what goes on in your mind. But it is literally like, it's something that sitting there for 8 hours and going over and over again, that never works. Like, it's always, even when we were in the room, it was always the actor who walked in and said, here's my shot, here you go, bye. Like, it didn't matter. It wasn't like it was life or death coming off this tape. And I do understand that actors are very very emotional, very introspective people who just want the best, and you want to do your best work and stuff, but then it can almost like spiral out of control, because then you're thinking about this, where the majority of the time, if you just lay it out there and you say, you know what, this is what I got, this is what I'm going to do, let it be, it tends to most of the time be the people that end up getting the job. And I just want to say that for anybody who's listening. I'm not saying that to you, Neal. I'm saying that to like anyone who's listening, because it is such an overlooked aspect of auditioning, whether it be self-tape, in-person, callbacks, chemistry reads, testing. It's usually the people who put in the work ahead of time. They're just like, okay, here's what I got. If you want to give me a note, great. If not, moving on with my life. And then they end up either getting it, or they're also mentally a bit more capable to move on from that and not think, well, maybe if I would have sent that other read. And then the other thing I want to say to what you said is the agent and manager aspect, because, and this is where I think sometimes it gets a bit lost, is that, or it gets put onto us, is that when your agents and managers are giving you feedback, it's not directly because of what we've said. And I know you know that, but it's like, it's something that we're constantly getting blamed for, either the lack of feedback or the wrong feedback or not enough notes or not enough context to things. And a lot of times agents and managers are either filtering it, or they're just not being, they don't know and they don't ask because they don't have enough time, nor do they care. And I would say that part is really hard to put onto casting directors, because in the room, I totally agree. Jess and I are on the same page in this. Like, when you're in the room, you get that instant feedback. You can give notes, you can do that. And unfortunately, the space we're living in right now doesn't allow for that. And even, I would say, a lot of times we can't give feedback and have the enough time to then redo an entire tape.
I think it's also, just to sort of piggyback on that, it's important to acknowledge the different level of actors. Because like Jen, you're talking about an actor who has been in it, who has maybe is auditioning at a guest star or series regular level, that is, have been able to build their experience level, have the in the room experience, like all of these aspects of your journey as an actor. But we also have to acknowledge the actor, the working actor, but the less working actor, maybe the co-star or someone who's like building their resume. Because those, when you have that experience, when you're in that sort of threshold of building your resume, those opportunities, especially if you don't have representation that you are connected with on that level, those opportunities might be few and far between. So like yeah. So the preciousness of every opportunity, that pressure, it weighs on the actor. And like, we're so aware of that. And also the process in which we get approval, like let's say an actor goes through the process, if they're a co-star actor, let's say hypothetically, we have to get approval on every single actor in many cases. So that the aspect of our job that actors never see, that it's behind the curtain, just sort of reinforces that experience of how precious every opportunity is. So we totally understand where that comes from and that amount of pressure and how pivotal this moment could be for you to get to the next stage, because that goalpost is always moving. So not to take away from the actor's experience at all, because that is like, we all understand those aspects of an actor's journey.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's absolutely right on. Like, part of the major issue here fundamentally is that neither of us sees the other's work, right? Like, we are not privy to either one's process. So you're not able to counsel me or my friend, like, and say like, hey, we had this 7.5 hours ago. Like, we're not able to do that. I yeah, I hear you guys. We can always be less precious with what we do. We can always throw it away, but I think part of the problem that this, or part of the evolution that this change in technology to remote work has done, is that it has removed us having a dialogue. And what I've heard from, actually, it was John Frank Levy that said this, about agents and managers asking for feedback. It's just like, look, when it's that remote and I've got that many more things to do, and I've seen twice as many actors as I would otherwise see in the room, that's very easily ignored. Like, it just becomes another thing that I'm like, and I've gotten that from, and I don't have small agents, or and I'm my management company is one of the biggest in the world. Like, and those people aren't able to get feedback, and they're just like, it's, and I don't think that's because they're all assholes or they've burned all their bridges socially. I think it's a question of volume, and that's kind of a statement, but that would be, I guess my question is that a function of volume? Is that a function of how much more work you guys have to do, and the overwhelming expectations that producers thrust into your laps?
Yeah, I would say it's definitely there's a big volume aspect of it, because even though our volume has increased, our support staff has not.
Right.
And I think that's a big part of the conversation too. And, we're going to be, our contracts expire, I think, at the end of September of next year. And we're going to be up for renegotiation at that point. And that's going to be a big conversation point, because if we're still in this environment where we're expected to deliver so many more auditions from, an international workspace now, especially because it's all virtual or self-taping, that's going to be a big conversation point, because we can't sustain this level of work on our end what the new expectations are, not having office space, not having, like, I'll tell you, when we're doing TV on a regular basis, it is a negotiation to get an assistant and an associate.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
is hard to get support staff on a regular basis. Now you up the ante with this many, like, they want to see everyone under the sun. And it's hard I get why actors are upset that pool has gotten so much bigger, but like that level of work is put on us too. And like the amount of stress that is added to the plate is the fact that, this is a disservice for actors we don't already know also. Like, you've been in it for a long time. You have built relationships, you have a body of work, we know who you are, what you're capable of, for like sort of to generalize, and people that are coming up, or that next generation, or just new people in underrepresented communities, like, we don't have that luxury, and we don't have the luxury of time, because the amount of work has increased so much, right? Volume wise. You and I have had the conversation of the work has not been spread equitably across the casting field by any means. So the sort of higher volume casting directors don't have time to give feedback or whatever the requests are, because they're doing so many projects. And
Sure.
then the rest of us are barely scraping by, so we have to do so many projects in order to sustain a livelihood, period.
Sure.
So I think that aspect from the casting perspective, that we're all overwhelmed in different ways, it also aligns with the actors, and we just don't, the amount of pressure that we're under to make sure that the actors that actually show up on set that maybe we've never met before can deliver,
Right.
or much older actors who have a beautiful, wonderful resume can deliver if they can remember their lines, or whatever the situation. I have faced both situations, so I think there's so many, again, not to endorse the self-tape space. Again, every actor thrives in a different environment, and whatever you do, I always heard the old adage of George Clooney was like a horrible auditioner, so he had, like, finally when he made it into the offer only space, that's when he started to really thrive. Like, huh?
It was terrible. Yeah.
He was terrible.
The reason he got Doug Ross was because he had memorized every single assistant's names and their dog's name, and was known and had an office there at building 41 or 42 or whatever it was on the Warner Brothers lot.
Yeah. So it's like, I don't want to take away from some people by going in a completely different direction, but there's got to be a middle ground. And I totally agree with you on that.
Yeah. I think you said something really intriguing, which is that about the people being able to deliver after seeing them just through this medium of self-tape. And this is another change that this has wrought, is like, you have zero clue whether I've been taping with my buddy for 8 hours and this is the 200th take and he's finally gotten it right. And he's such an asshole perfectionist that this co-star that is just saying, here's the cheese pizza, is looking to like drag down the entire day, or whether he can deliver, whether he's that person that can kind of shrug it off and deliver it in one take, right? Wow, that was fantastic. Moving on, right? You have no idea whether that person you've hired for a comedy is actually funny, or whether they've like worked it into the ground with their coach, who has like parroted them in and puppeted them into a performance. We have no idea. And this is part of this change that has been wrought by this. And like, we can say that, yes, it's more accessible. It is. Yes, it is, like it increases access to people that were never historically able to be seen before. It doesn't discriminate geographically. All of those things are true. However, it creates enormous complications. And I'll add to that, I actually think that I know that Amanda was actually posting about the AI casting thing, right? And I'm sure maybe you guys got the emails as well, or the Instagram direct messages. But I actually do think that if we're going to continue down this road of casting through technology, that is going to become part and parcel with the casting process. And if it's not like you being absolutely replaced by AI or an algorithm or some sort of algorithm, so it makes it so you don't have to hire an assistant, an associate, right? So it's like, wow, I get all this work done, and while I'm actually reviewing tapes, it is like coming up with my selects and is picking the best takes for me, and I just get to review it and say like, yeah, that looks great, right? Like that is going to be an efficiency that will be found by AI. Or let's say that like if you're going to rely on me making a digital tape for something, and I'm like, you know what, I've got my Meryl Streep app that I'm able to like jerry rig my performance into some like tear jerking Sophie's Choice monologue that is going to break your heart. And then I can't do that on set. Like, how am I not going to use that as an actor? And because I got curious about this a few months ago, and I actually asked a few actors, like a few actor friends of mine, I was like, hey, let's just say hypothetically that an AI existed that you would be able to like make your performance into Daniel Day-Lewis. Let's just say that like, you could go full on, Phantom Thread, There Will Be Blood, and it would just make you Daniel Day-Lewis. And it was the ones that, ironically enough, that weren't working a lot, that were like, no, I would never, my art is pure. But it was the ones that were like work, that were kind of like, yeah, fuck, I'd take that advantage. Yeah, why not? Why not? And if you're not going to get those people, then you're going to get a fucking TikToker. You're going to get a YouTuber that wants to do it, that has Jen, you're going to get the people that made you flee for London that will do it because all they're obsessed with is being cool and being fucking famous. And they don't give a shit about this as an art. And that is absolutely something that will.
What is the sustainability of that? Like that services at one point, but like it's a tight-knit community. If someone can't deliver, they can't deliver. They're not going to get another job.
I will say, I actually don't fundamentally believe that AI can take our jobs. I don't agree with that.
It's not that AI will take your job. It's that somebody who can use AI will do your job better. Or
no,
if it's not better,
I don't agree with that. I don't agree with that at all. I fundamentally don't agree with it because I think that
they'll be cheaper,
AI,
and that really matters.
No, I don't.
And I'll give you an example.
But wait, you're not even letting me finish my sentence.
A very easy way of. Go ahead.
So here's the thing. I think like AI right now is being used as a bit of a scare tactic in terms of things because I think that fundamentally you cannot replace instinct. And so AI, as for all it's saying and doing, whether you're talking about acting or casting, I'll speak to casting in particular, but I don't think that, and most producers that I've spoken to agree with me, is that there are so many times that you're casting a movie that we go to bat, we fight, we will do whatever that we need to get a certain person a role because we think it's right. AI does not have that technology to say this person's going to be right in it. So ultimately, if you were trying to make the argument that AI can either do our jobs or do them better, I think it's fundamentally wrong because AI doesn't have any kind of instinct or gauge to change the opinions of other people. So what you end up going to get is you can use AI to cast your lead roles of, okay, I want an actor who's 35, who's famous, who can do drama really well. Great. Here's your top 10 most famous actors. That's already happening at the studio level where they take the same actors and use it over and over again. That's why you see the same actors on CBS shows, the same actors on NBC shows. Like it's very much. So yes, maybe that aspect you could save money in a studio exec that doesn't need to make lists of the same 10 actors for every single show they do. But fundamentally reading in a room and reading an audition with an actor, I don't think AI can do no matter what. I fundamentally disagree with that very much so because I think
you're right. I want to be clear about what I'm actually saying is I think human instinct can't be replaced by it. But what I'm saying can and will be is like your process. If you remain an independent casting director and you're doing this all on your own, and you're fighting the same problems of volume where the studio is dumping innumerable requests in your lap, and you have the choice to either A, not work for that studio and reject that job, or B, use an AI platform that will help you do your job while also allowing you to use your own human instincts and all the things that have led you to this. I bet that you're going to use that AI augmentation that will still allow you to like say like, hey, I like this person, or I've got an instinct that this person is better. I am willing to bet that most people will do that, given the choice between going without a job or using a platform that helps them do their job to the efficiency that's being demanded by a company that is paying them.
Is she frozen for you as well?
I think I blew her mind. I guess, like, look, I think that I don't think AI can do any of our jobs. I think there is an absolute human element. If it were up to AI, we would have had more tentpole Marvel films this year. We would have had more Disney films that would have shat the bed. It took the brilliance of Greta Gerwig to pull the film industry out of a funk. But I guess I also, and I want to be really clear about this, look, guys, I don't think our real fight is with the AMPTP. I think that, like, I read a really stunning analysis of the media industry by this guy named Scott Galloway, who's got a great podcast. I encourage everyone to listen to it. And he was talking about the real fight is with, it's not in Burbank. It's not even on Sunset with Netflix. The real fight that we have to fight is in Silicon Valley. It's in Seattle, and it's in Redmond.
Absolutely.
We are going to be fighting against companies that don't value human instinct, that look at all of this stuff as crawlable fucking content. And already, like, we are in an industry right now that is in the midst of structural decline. You know, this is Jessica, this is a figure, while we wait to get Jen back, this is a figure that really blew my mind. Do you know the YouTuber Mr. Beast?
Yeah.
He has more subscribers than Hulu does.
That is insane.
Yeah.
Wow.
Do you know how much bigger the video game industry is than the film and TV industry?
I don't know, but I want to know. How much?
3 times bigger. So we, in the midst of all of this, we've missed, like, in the midst of all this labor strife, we've missed one of the biggest stories. You're back.
I'm back. Sorry.
No, I was. Look, I want to be clear about this, Jen. I'm not saying that AI will replace you. I am not saying, but AI is already replacing actors. And there was Matt Bush or Charlie Bowden had a really insight. Do you guys know Charlie Bowden?
Yeah, but I don't know what you're referencing
Charlie
here.
Bowden had a really insightful kind of point about AI. One was about how he got his SAG card, and it was he was an extra. Yeah. And if AI is already going to replace extras on set, and that's been happening since Lord of the Rings, right? That's been happening since Eyes Wide Shut, and you had all those, like, naked ladies that were kind of preventing you from seeing the other people were fucking in the background, right? But, like, I remember looking at an algorithm that Peter Jackson and his team had built for Return of the King, and it had a bunch of elves fighting a bunch of orcs. And I remember looking at that and going, my God, that's so impressive. And at that time, I didn't put 2 and 2 together. That was like, wow, that's 100 actors who don't have a job, right? Yeah. So Charlie Bowden's point was, like, he got his SAG card. I'm sure I'm going to butcher this. He got his SAG card through being an extra, right? And then he got his first big break because he was cast as the younger version of another actor on a TV show. Both of those jobs aren't here now. Yeah. And so, like, this is, whether we think that, like, my absolute humanity can't and won't be replaced, yeah, it won't. But there is going to be somebody who also has a humanity, that also has a soul, that is going to do that job cheaper with the help of AI. And so it's not that a computer is going to, like, take our job. It's more that somebody who knows how to use a computer is.
Well, I mean, I think that's very reflective on the what was it, the job posting of the Netflix $900,000
Yeah.
AI manager.
Yeah,
You're like,
yeah, right.
yeah. But I think that's like super indicative. I was on a panel. I was on some sort of panel that had a couple of directors. This is right when the DGA had closed their deal essentially,
Right.
and one of the actors on the panel, she had said something, and this is and again an aspect that I hadn't thought of, just in like, you know, Matthew McConaughey does a animated movie. That animated movie becomes an animated series, but Matthew McConaughey doesn't want to do it. So before, you would hire a voiceover actor who would do it and would do a voice match. And now if this, you know, if there is no regulation against this, that actor's job will disappear. And that's a series regular on an animated series.
Right. Yeah, that's one job that goes away.
Yeah. And just even the aspect of like the background artists, this and I was so glad that they had said it on at the press release, that Duncan had said it in the press release about like they want to do the scanning of the background artists for one day of work or whatever the fee was. It's like, if that actor ever breaks through and becomes a famous actor, that studio owns their likeness forever and ever and ever.
Yeah, it's I think
very jarring.
Yeah, it is, and I think that the need for informed consent is an absolute necessity. I do want to get back to just the casting director and casting in AI, because I want to be clear. I sympathize with your plight and with your guys's like economic and working conditions. I think if you are increasingly going to feel the squeeze from larger casting offices, producers demanding everything of you, and you want to just use a simple algorithm that helps you, and they won't give in to your demand to have an assistant or an associate. Or let's say they say, yeah, you can have an assistant, you can't have an associate, right? That's certainly a reasonable scenario, right? Let's say that there is an AI program that goes like, all right, well, this is way too much work. Were those your dogs, Jessica? Our work-life balance is all messed up. If somebody does choose to use that platform to help them do their job, that also means there's one less person who's learning how to do that job. Because part of the function that I think the AMPTP and that we're missing here, and the actors are missing too, is like, we're no longer apprenticing human to human. We're no longer seeing that work. Look, guys, like on the reader tip, being in a casting office and seeing the process from your side of the table, being a reader, seeing the mistakes that actors make when they walk in the room, especially like on Broadway, and somebody comes in and it's like, hello, everybody. And you're like, you're not getting the job. Like you just go like, all right, no. That's a human to human experience. And like, we've already crossed the Rubicon of removing that. Right. And to be clear, I don't think this is the artists that are going to make these choices, but we are going to be forced into choices whether we work or adopt a little bit of that technology. And like, look, something really simple. An AI platform is autofocus on your camera. That's artificial intelligence. We don't have a focus puller there looking at me. It's like, technically I'm taking a job, right?
Yeah.
Like that's one job. Or I think of AI in the following way, and I think this is how it's going to kind of play out, is like, we think of pictures that we post to Instagram. Think how many people are enabled to become really top-notch photographers, to the point where like, my God, those could be professional photographs. And what they've done is they've taken the automatic setting on their Canon or their Sony. They've hit snap. They've edited it in Photoshop or Lightroom. They've chosen a filter and they've put it up. And like, every step of the way is like, yes, they've used their instinct to frame and to when to actually press, like, to have the shutter closed. But like, every other thing has been figured out by a program, by an algorithm, right? Like, And then you think of the absolute deluge of content that we see on Instagram. The absolute, like, my God, we're just surrounded by 1,000 pictures of people's, cats or the sunsets or what the fuck ever. And like, it has raised the kind of level. But then you see the artist, like an analog artist. You think of like Alfred Stieglitz or something, and the way that he was able to use a photograph. Like, think of Alfred Stieglitz using autofocus or using a digital camera and then using that. Like, there's some people that, like, it changes the tool of how we do it, but there's still a human there that is making those decisions. And like, those are the photographers that are making money now, right? Things like one of the magazine that I had written for, Sports Illustrated, like, their whole thing was taking pictures of sports so you could reimagine it in your mind. And it was like, it was as good as you've been there. And like, all those people are out of work now. That whole thing is just, it's a chop shop, right? Like, these changes are coming.
Yeah, I think it's
prepared for it.
I think it's definitely, I mean, just that example is, the landscape of the art has changed because of the technology. And I think it'll likely be a generational thing, because it's, we've talked about it before, where you are in this current state, there's going to be, and this applies to all professions within the industry and probably on the outside of the industry, where, you are, goodness, I just lost my train of thought.
You were talking about the
Oh,
art.
sorry. Yeah. So like, there's oh my God, the current like legacy group of actors, legacy casting directors, whatever it is, they're there now. Our generation of casting directors are attempting to come up, and there is a point in which, whether you're an actor, casting director, you can't sustain this lifestyle. You can't sustain the economic impact of where we are now. And so you leave the industry. And so there's going to be a 12 to 15 year experience gap within these two generations, because we couldn't survive. Yeah. Right. So then I think that is at that point where the assistants in the casting experience, when the assistants are then put in charge but don't know how to be directors, those are the people that are going to probably embrace that technology.
Sure. I think that's absolutely right. People that don't know any better. And there are going to be actors that have no training in theater and don't give a shit about the theater, that are not going to see a problem with using a talent filter on their audition. And that is like, look how many changes there's been just in the last 12 months that we've been talking about AI. Like, what's going to happen in the next 3 years? I could make myself into, like, we're talking about Benedict Cumberbatch playing Khan. I could make myself into fucking Smog the Dragon I'm sure I can do that now. Right? Like, and Jen, I mean, we started this before we got on, talking about like the difference in kind of like people feeling as if they're curing fucking cancer here in LA and New York. It's like, oh, what I do is the most ennobled art form in the world, my good man. I don't know why they talk like they're British, but let's just say their souls do. And but like there is a here in LA and even in New York, like the biggest theater company in LA has gone bankrupt. Like, they're facing a fucking $20 million budget shortfall or some shit. The public is cutting back fucking programs. Like, the grounds in which we say these are our training academies. This is how we train the next generation. These things are going bankrupt right before our very eyes. And like, the next generation of kids are not looking to Daniel Day-Lewis or Reed Birney or Audra McDonald for inspiration. They're looking to Mr. Beast and Logan Paul. It's funny. Just one last point about this is, like, I was in an acting class, and I remember seeing there's a kind of great acting class that I love here in LA, and like, it's all these killers that are like working actors that have never really quite made it, so they're really embittered, but they're like, they want to keep working really, really hard. I'm one of them. But the teacher is really, really high profile. And there was a very famous TikToker who was thrust into this class by her agency. It was one of the big alphabet soup agencies. And she couldn't hold a moment. And I think she was working on a play, and it was really stunning to see because it was so indicative of like all she could do was deliver one line at a time. She could do it for about 15 seconds, and then it stopped. And then it was a new moment. There was no continuity there.
Yeah.
And you go like, well, fuck. All right, maybe she's great, and she like Deadline just announced some big movie she's going to be in, and fine. And maybe they can cut around her. But you put her on stage, and I know that some producer on Broadway is champing at the bit to put her in Barefoot in the Park, and they'll fucking do it. And that's where we're at, right? And if you could have a filter for that girl that says like Meryl Streep eyes me, she's gonna fucking do it because there's a lot of money. Because like she's not thinking about like the beauty of the art form, she's thinking about the perfume ad that she wants to put in a duty-free shop in Shanghai.
Oh, that's depressing.
But I don't want to be depressing about it. Like I'm terrible at Thanksgiving and Christmas with my family. Maybe when you become happier and more just like fucking facile. I look, a part of why I wanted to write that Variety article, and I know, and I fully hear you on the problems with my estimation, and I hope you can accept the fact that I was trying to do that in good faith because I wanted to come up with a value for what that labor is worth. And again, like, please get at me, girls. Like, if there's a better number for that value, let me know. And I am happy to blast that out. But I am trying to come up with a value but I see a lot of problems in our industry, and I see them on a structural level. I don't even think that like, hey, this fight is like, fuck you, Bob Iger, for sailing on your yacht. And I was like, well, also like we've got to figure out some pay disparity in our own industries, right? Like you got to figure out some opportunity disparities in the casting industry, right? Like there's some huge opportunity hoarding. So like while we're having this fight, the amount of television and film that is being consumed is dwindling. The size of our industries are dwindling. One of the biggest points that we missed in and amongst all this labor strife was the following: was Microsoft bought Activision Blizzard for $68 billion. Do you know how much the entire value of Paramount Global is? It's $11 billion.
Wow.
Do you know what's also worth $11 billion? Endeavor. Endeavor's worth 11. And we keep harping on the fact that Ari Emanuel made 600 million or whatever. It's like, dude, but he's not a fucking talent agent. That's not his business. His business now is World Wrestling Entertainment, America's most famous and most popular form of live theater, and the UFC, right? Like, and IMG events, comedy shows. Like, our business is changing. And any idea that it's like that the good old days are gone, absolutely, but we've got to adapt very, very quickly. And again, I can't evangelize this enough. Our enemies aren't in Hollywood and Burbank. Our enemies, our true enemies, the people that want to eat our lunch, are in Silicon Valley, Redmond, and Seattle.
Yeah.
I will say, I think, to kind of maybe wrap this section up, because I want to ask you a question, but that has nothing to do with this. But I do think we're seeing a correction, because I think you say, like, I think we overswung it. I think we see it in politics. We see it in how life is in general. But like, you always have like that massive, like the amount of content that was being created prior to COVID. Clearly, I don't think it could have ever sustained itself. And you see that in just like all the money being lost at Netflix.
You mean what? 600 shows sustainable?
Yeah.
Right.
So I think we see it like coming back to center of like everything. And I also think that maybe there's the world of actors where, again, Jess and I see on our side where there's just a massive amount of actors that I don't think we've ever seen anything like this this many people choosing this life, whether they believe that they are talented or not. I think they see the shininess of it, and I think eventually it will correct itself a little bit too, where people are like, this isn't sustainable. So I hope that we're going in that direction where, and I think, the strikes and hopefully resolutions of them will get us back to that like normalcy place of some sort of like being a bit more realistic, because I agree. I think we're heading towards a direction that maybe needs to like scale back quite a bit.
Well, I think that's always been the conversation of, as the Netflix and all of the different streaming platforms would pop up, whether it was CBS All Access that doesn't exist anymore, like all these different streaming platforms, the conversation has always, when will this bubble burst? And it's bursting now.
Yeah.
Now it is. And now we're dealing with the fallout.
Yeah. And you guys, if anybody really wants to know, and you guys included, about like one of the big changes that's happened and why we're really facing a vastly different economic landscape, there's a great Frontline episode on PBS. Leave it to me to plug PBS, but it's a Frontline episode. It's called Easy Money, and it's about the changes in the interest rates, and that's really kind of what's enabled Netflix's huge growth, right? Is like the same kind of interest rates that allowed the housing economy to keep growing. That's all changed, right? As we've tried to get inflation under control, the interest rates keep going up and up and up and up and up. So what does that mean? That means for a company like Warner Brothers Discovery buys Warner Brothers, takes on an enormous amount of debt. Disney buys Fox, takes on an enormous amount of debt. Everybody is spending a huge amount of content as a loss leader. They're spending money on all of these shows, $20-30 million. Amazon's fucking the $2 trillion company, Amazon, spending $30 million an episode on the Rings of Power. This is all a loss leader. And then all of a sudden, those chickens come home to roost when that's like, wow, this is 5 times more expensive to carry this debt. Quite literally, it's gone from 1%, to 5%, right? So it's like it becomes hugely expensive to do it. Plus, you add this into it. Everybody's followed Netflix off a cliff. Every single one of these streaming companies. And they've killed their golden goose of cable and linear television. This is still where Disney and Paramount, CBS, Comcast still gets its primary drivers and revenues from linear. They don't get money from fucking streaming. So when I see Adam Conover going, hey, everybody, get this, like, oh, Disney wants to pay you, like, this guy is either deluding himself or he is deluding us. Because you know how much fucking Peacock lost last quarter? $641 million. Last quarter. Not last year. Last quarter. That's insane.
Yeah.
Like, yeah. And I keep seeing like the WGA say, like, we're looking for is $6 billion or something like that, or I'll probably cancel myself by saying this, but like they are essentially, these are what we're looking for as an increase. Is like, well, or no. It was the audition pay people. It was the audition pay people, and I was like, how much is this $541 going to cost? Like if you have auditions at scale, and part of the bug light that attracted so many people is like, no, if everyone just gets one audition per week, then it'll enable every single one of us to make our $27,000. And that was part of it, right? It was like it put somebody just over the threshold, like $28,000. Still not a living wage, but like it was like, yes, this is like every single person. And what they hadn't figured out is like, is that like, I mean, can I start going in for fucking co-stars that I just intentionally blow? I'm like, yeah, I'm here to play the orderly. Yeah. No, I don't want the job, but I auditioned. And that's my 540. Like that puts me over the cap, right? Times that by 160,000, that is $6 billion. Yeah. Right. And like you go, like, you guys are seriously demanding the entire profits of the streaming industry. Like There's only one fucking streamer that's profitable. And you're going like, yeah, we're going to add this into your costs. And this is going to be your loss leader. It's like, and Jen, maybe you can speak to this, is like part of what really fascinates me is I feel like LA is at a Detroit moment, right? What I mean by that is this, is that LA is nominally still the center of production. Hollywood is still the center of production in the same way that Detroit is still the center of production of GM and Ford and Chrysler, right? Mm-hmm. But in reality, our shit's being made other places. And like, as expensive as we make it here, look, we're just going to send shit to Canada or to the UK. UK is cheaper to shoot. I'm as a dual citizen. Fuck yeah, right. As a dual citizen in a fucking Canadian dual citizen, I've been in the weird position of having a U.S. production company try to outsource my job to myself. It's like, hey, if you just take this ACTRA contract, we'll give you more money. I was like, wow, Jesus. And you go like, well, why are they cheaper? It's like, one, you're not flying me in, you're not putting me up at a hotel, the contract's cheaper, you're not paying for pension and health. Right? Mm-hmm. Like mm-hmm. We are, this is part of the difficulty of this. And I don't want to sound like I'm saying like we don't deserve this as a union. We do, but part of it is what you just said, Jessica, is like there are far more actors and writers than there have ever been. And whether we like it or not, we are in a bloated industry. And that is ripe for correction. And so and I remember having this conversation with one of the chief economists of the union, just like, and I was like, what's happening? Like everybody's talking about this is the golden age of streaming and everybody should be working all the fucking time. And he was like, people have gotten a lot of cultural and political signals that everybody can participate. So there have never been more jobs, but there have never been fewer careers. And that point about, Jen, your point about sustainability of the person that uses the AI program, it's like, yeah, I don't know if they fucking care. They might get that one job or that two jobs or that three jobs, or maybe they do have whatever mini career because I've got 37 million Instagram followers or whatever. But that is like, we've got so many people that had like one or two jobs that are now like, well, wait a minute, where's the career that I was promised? Because I thought I was going to be working forever. And it's just like, man, there are a lot of hogs and not enough teats.
Yeah. Yeah. And honestly, it's so interesting you say that because I was just talking to somebody, a casting director here about it. We were talking about just like basic economics and how we don't think Hollywood quite understands like the fundamental of basic economics, because there is, and I won't go into the whole spiel, but you just kind of touched on it, that there is an underlying, like everyone who's striking and, you know, speaking of all these things, it's a very emotional topic and we all believe that like we all deserve what we need and stuff. But at the end of the day, you're also fighting a corporation who does not have any of that. And they look at the bottom line, and the economics support the corporations in some respect, because you can't fight economics with humanity. You can't just want what's good for everybody to beat out economics. So you have to find a middle ground that is going to get you both to where you want. Because I think right now with the actors in particular, I think it's a very emotional fight. And it's like, you know, it's something where it's like, well, okay, well, what are you willing to give up? You know, because the corporations at the end of the day are going to say, here is our bottom line. We are losing all this money. We have, you know, we need to somehow alleviate that. So like, how do we come together to make that? And that's one thing I haven't heard from either side onto like, how do you solve that? Because you either get this emotional, impassioned speech. And like I said, I'm very for actors getting proper pay and all that kind of stuff. However, it's like you have to at least be willing to understand that fundamentally they are a corporation. You're not dealing with another human face that's like, oh yeah, I really want you to do that. At the end of the day, they want to save money and they want to be able to function in the positive. And right now they've been spending so much money especially during COVID. Everyone lost money.
Now they're losing more money.
Mhm.
So it's like, where can that middle ground come where they, because I don't see where the resolution comes, and I haven't heard that. That's where, and again, I'm a bit far removed from it because I don't read about it. I'm not involved in it every day. But I read whatever's given to me or whatnot, and try to stay informed as possible. But I just think right now it's a bit disheartening on my side of it, because I don't hear something where it's like, okay, we understand that we want our 11% increase. Great. Everyone deserves that, but we're willing to give up this aspect, so that's where I'm struggling to try to, I guess, maybe see, or hopefully hear, maybe from the future, in the future, of like, okay, where are you going to do that? Because at the end of the day, you are dealing with somebody who doesn't care about your feelings, and they want to save as much money as possible, and to me, that's more of a realist outlook to it.
But I think that's part of the negotiation process. And so I can't speak on the sort of like the WGA side, because I don't really know sort of the minutia of that negotiation process. But it sounded very, at least for SAG, it sounded like they sort of faked them out for a while, the AMPTP. And then there wasn't much of a negotiation happening. I do think they gave up that the pay for auditions situation as part of a we're all happy about that, don't worry. But I think they gave that up as part of the negotiation tactic. But we will know more when they go back to the table, because right now it feels like there was a lot of it that was not intended to meet you in the middle, the way that conversation went.
Yeah. Yeah, Jessica, I think you're right in terms of the characterization, especially of the extension. What I've heard from my friends in the who were on the negotiating committee is that the AMPTP really didn't use any of that time whatsoever. They kept delaying, canceling meetings. Even the federal arbitrators were brought in at the last possible moment, to the surprise of the Screen Actors Guild. So it felt extremely disingenuous, and like the most generous reading of it is that the AMPTP was just essentially trying to craft a narrative that they were the responsible ones in the room.
And also to bake in some more time to do press for the big blockbuster summer movies.
1,000%. They wanted the July 4th weekend. Absolutely. Jen, to your point, as far as like what people are willing to give up or not willing to give up, I agree. I think, part of where I struggle with this is like, it feels as if we want two things. When I saw the WGA on strike, it was what it felt like people wanted was both the freedom of expression and the upfront payments that came with Netflix. And if we really like go back in time, we put ourselves in a little time machine. Everybody was lauding fucking Netflix. Come on. Everybody says like, no, they're so great. They just greenlight everything. They love their storytellers. They love them. We all fucking bought it. We were like little mice. We all ate the cheese and we didn't know it was fucking poisoned, right? Like we have to accept our own kind of like culpability in this in some ways.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But it feels like what they want is the freedom, the artistic freedom of that kind of 10 episode model. I'm gonna microtize my audience, and I'm gonna get this content delivered to the exact right person that's gonna watch it, and then I'm gonna be paid like I'm working for Law and Order SVU in 2005. Like I'm gonna have the job security of a 23 episode order, and I'm going to get the residual structure of that. And like, look at the fucking brilliance of Netflix. Do you know one of the biggest like streaming hits right now is? It's number 8 globally on Netflix.
Is it Suits?
It's fucking Suits. What I mean, like lean back viewing, right? Do you watch Suits? Is that why you're laughing?
Yeah.
Oh, good.
We just had this conversation.
Well, and Patrick Adams is one of my favorite people. Good buddy, like fucking love that dude. No shade whatsoever, but like, look, that's not Succession, right? And it wasn't even like it has doesn't even have any of that fucking, like, on USA. If it was getting the numbers it's getting on Netflix today, do you think USA would have ever canceled it? No.
No.
So like part of the brilliance of Netflix, we have to go like, wow, they do a phenomenal job of delivering this content to the right people that will watch it. And it's not just that, it's Longmire before that, it's you. They've done this. Oh, they know how to fucking do this, right? So part of it is like I don't think we know what it is we want. We want both the job security and the money like it's fucking 2005, and we're going to treat the AMPTP like it's also 2005, that they are the big Rockefellers and JP Morgans of their day. But here's the thing, they're not. They are losing money. Fucking Bob Iger is talking. You know what else was said at that CNBC interview in Sun Valley, Idaho? That he's thinking about selling ABC. That he's looking for a strategic partner for ESPN. So we're just so like, fuck you, Bob. Unrealistic. Fuck you. We're not looking at the fact that Bob's in trouble. Bob is in trouble.
Mhm.
Bob is not the industrialist of the age that he thinks he is. Bob might sell to Tim Cook over at Apple, right?
But Bob is still raking it in himself.
But fuck that. So is Tom Cruise. So is The Rock. You know,
That's not a not to
irony of the Rock giving a seven figure donation to the Actors Fund. Good for you, dude.
Yeah.
Absolutely good for you. But if it was $1 million, the irony is that's 2%, and that's the same thing that SAG is looking for in terms of profit participation. And runaway like income disparity in our own industries is just as much of a problem.
Oh yeah. I mean, we see it all the time when we're doing our indies. You have to rob Peter to pay Paul. You gotta take from the bottom to pay the top in order to get your movie greenlit. It happens every day.
Having been Peter more than I like, yeah, I'm keenly aware of that. I think, but Jen, I think there's one other thing I would add to that about the strike is we're missing the places that there are our values and our interests align.
Mm-hmm.
And where those are is like, again, that is fighting, that is like getting together as creators, as people that are human, that have a human art form that has been one of the most powerful economic drivers. I think Hollywood and music is still one of the biggest net exports that our country still makes. Right, it's a huge, and think of the soft power that we have. Think of the child, the fucking slum of Mumbai that knows Luke Skywalker. Couldn't tell you who plays for the New York Yankees, but knows what Luke Skywalker is. That is tremendous soft power, and we're fucking it up. And what we're fucking it up for is the 90 minutes a day that somebody who's not paying for Netflix watches on TikTok. It is for more people getting their TV on YouTube. Like, this is the real danger. It isn't like whether Bob Iger's on a yacht or not. The real danger is like we're sailing pretty fucking fast towards irrelevance. That's the real danger. And we have to band together because, look, AI right now, AI in Redmond, in San Francisco, through all of these tech companies are banding together and investing fucking billions upon billions in AI. Microsoft just announced their AI helper platform. I forget the name of it. The day after they announced it, in one day, they went up $154 billion in revenue.
Wow.
That is 3/4 of the way to the value of the entire company of Disney. 154 billion one day, right? And what that value is it's crawling all of our content. It is crawling every single episode of television, every single song, every single fucking thing that we put on the web. It is crawling that data day after day after day, and we're doing nothing about it. And here we are fighting about how much we get paid, or 11% increase. And like, guys, Bob Iger isn't going to be our boss for much longer. He's fucking like his lunch is about to get eaten.
Yeah. It's the grand scheme of things is very powerful.
But I don't say that to depress you guys. Like what I want, like, look, if there's something you guys want to do about this, and this is something that I like, we have an administration in the White House right now that is one of the most fervently antitrust administrations that we've had in decades, right? I forget her name. I think it's Lena Khan runs the Federal Trade Commission. And part of their mandate, and they've just come out with new merger guidelines. Part of this mandate is not just how it affects markets and consumers, but how it affects workers. And right now, those new merger guidelines are open for public comment. And if all of us as consumers, as people in this industry can talk about, hey, I've been in a vertically integrated industry for a long time. Disney bought ABC, then it bought Fox, then it like all these things have happened, and then it bought fucking Hulu, and like there have been disadvantages to being inside of this system, and we can actually publicly comment. So we have like a huge ally in the White House right now that we need to use, and with the FTC, because I saw the Microsoft buying Activision Blizzard for $68 billion as like, that is scary, because that is Apple will buy Disney, or maybe Comcast will, or like
they'll
Paramount.
just continue to merge. That's like the ultimate thing.
But we can stop it. We can actually try to stop it. And that's, I think, like by increasing competition within our industry is the only way we really get paid.
Yeah,
that is like we've got to go back to a model like of where the studio isn't selling to its own streamer and then they're owning the content. And there's some encouraging news there with like Warner Brothers Discovery selling a lot of its library to Netflix and shit. But that's all got to we got to break up the studios from the streamers. That's the only way we get paid. And then like there's a lot of encouraging stuff in AVOD, which is advertising video on demand, and fast channels, free ad supported television. Like there are metrics there that can pay us, but we've gotta really be front footed about it. And we can't just be so infantile in our thinking that we're like, pay us, Bob. Like, fuck that. No, it's like the same infantile thinking of like Occupy Wall Street. There was like, fucking Goldman Sachs has so much money, bro. And they're like, do you lack a fundamental understanding of how economics works? Seriously. Like, and this is like.
But most of Hollywood does, to be fair.
Totally.
Just
like,
say. Go have a conversation with anybody out there. Probably 90% don't understand basic economics.
Sure, and I'm just a Hallmark prince talking about macroeconomics. I get it. I'm as guilty. Look, guys. I am part of why I'm so keenly interested in this, and why this isn't just opinion and a bunch of like gas on my part is like I'm writing a book about this, and like I'm like. This moment caught me at a really like interesting time where I'm writing about the economics of the industry we're in. And part of what like about 6 months ago, I was like, I know dick all about how the media actually works, like how this shit works. And so I wanted to educate myself as much as possible. And I will bore any single person that dares to drink with me to hear about vertical integration in media conglomerates. I'm like, oh, who once played my father.
Oh, I love that.
Oh, man.
Well, if anybody is interested in learning about the economy and how it relates to Hollywood, Neal is on Instagram. He's ready for a drink.
Just get you that hornet's nest of fucking macroeconomics. Have you on a plate hey, one thing here's a question I have for you guys. What is one thing you want my community to know or to understand that we don't?
I think for me, I would say that I don't even know if it's like understanding. It's that we need to communicate. That's like the big thing. Cause I think we're always set as like across the table, like one versus the other. And I think this is a cultural thing in the acting community from the very beginning when you guys are taking classes, this idea that you have to, like, the shock and awe of the casting experience to make an impression. And I think for us, it's like, it's not necessarily that, and it's counter productive for most actors.
Yeah.
So I think especially in this moment in history of our industry sort of hopefully not imploding, but partially imploding in this moment, that, you know, that like, let's unite versus being separated. You know, I think that's the best, because I think even during COVID, when we were all in lockdown, casting directors tried to come out and support actors as much as possible, whether it was like, you know, having conversations or hosting open calls. And I don't know if that was necessarily added fuel to the fire that a lot of actors are upset about now. I don't know, but I think, you know, we want to support actors as much as possible, and knowing that like we're in it together as much as you can be. You know, ask questions, be part of the conversation, versus I think a lot of, especially in media, it's a lot of slinging accusations in different aspects of what we do. And so I think that for me, and that's partially why, actually not partially, that's mostly why we started this podcast, is we wanted to pull the curtain back and to educate actors and remove the, or minimize misinformation, and, you know, to share as much as we can so there's not this huge rift between us as a community.
Jen?
Agreed.
I said too much.
Oh, I like what they said. Perfect. Well, no, it's beautiful. If there's anything I think, to know that you are our advocates, and you are our first line of advocating for artists and for the artistic process. We don't have an interface with production, and I only know, you know, the tip of the iceberg of how difficult your jobs are and how increasingly difficult they've become. And I think our communities, and I agree with you, Jessica, our communities don't understand enough of one another's processes and don't communicate enough. I would just urge you to know that, like, you are our advocates, and so advocate for not just the actors and their performances, but for collaboration between our communities, because I think that's what's really beautiful about what we do together.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, on that note, we have that very important question to ask you that Jen has been dying to ask.
Yes. It's very important.
It's about me.
Very, very, very,
It's about
very
me,
important.
Spice Man.
It's what?
Is this about me being an Old Spice man?
Old Spice man. Oh, no.
Yeah, I was an Old
No.
Spice man. That's it. Let's share it now.
Did not know about that. What we
Jen,
really
hit me
want to
with
know
that.
is that if the world was ending tomorrow and you had to cheers the end of the world with your favorite cocktail, what would it be?
Oh, my favorite cocktail?
Mhm.
The Martinez.
Oh, which kind?
What is that? I don't even know.
So our Martinez is I'm sorry, I'm getting a little choked up. My dad and I took a really beautiful trip together, and it was when I first moved to LA. I picked him up in in Southern Oregon, and we were going to drive down the coast to LA together. And I just moved to LA. I was working on a TV show. My dad is he has a doctorate, but it might as well be in like esoterica. He's just like the most kind of random, great Trivial Pursuit partner. maybe not a good earner. So he got it into his mind that there was this tiny little town in the East Bay, right across the bridge on the Sacramento River from Napa, called Martinez, and that they had invented the martini. That it was this gold rush town that was up from Sacramento on the way to San Francisco, and they invented the martini. I was like, it didn't found it fucking dubious. So I sailed into, we got in there, and it was this like town tucked behind a bunch of like oil derricks and refineries. There's nothing like glamorous about this town whatsoever. And like whatever place that invented the martini was long gone at this point. There was a cocktail bar there. So we got in there, and my dad ordered a gin martini, and the guy and it was a little tiny cathedral of booze. And my dad told him this probably apocryphal story about that Ed McMahon told Johnny Carson about perfection and perfection belonging to God, about like the perfect martini being made and this hand coming down from the heavens and taking it because only perfection could belong to God. And I was listening to my dad, totally fucking embarrassed. And the guy was like, "What do you want?" And I was like, "I don't know, surprise me." He made me this drink that was Geneva or Old Tom gin, which is like a sweet gin. It's a brown gin. And then he put Luxardo and I think dry vermouth. I think it's either dry or sweet vermouth. I don't know. I know how to order it, not how to make it. And I was like, "This is fucking delicious. What is this?" And the guy said, "It's Martinez." And then we got to talking, and I said I was moving down to LA, and he said, "Well, if you like a Martinez, the best place to get them is this place called Kohl's. Have you guys ever been to Kohl's or know what it is?" Yeah, Kohl's is downtown. And I was like, "You got to be shitting me. I moved, my apartment is 9 floors above that bar." And it just felt like a second that I was in the right place. So that is my drink. And then I tried to evangelize enough people to it that it was put into the TV show I was working on. And then I felt, but the moment I felt the most proud was the next pilot season. I was reading a bunch of pilots and I saw somebody order a Martinez, and I was like, it's like that moment, you know, when you're like a kid and you have like a saying or something, you do like a handshake and you see it on TV. It's like, I invented that. It. You'll sound you'll fucking like people listen to you. That's what it felt like.
Oh, I love that. That's a great story.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
What's your drink, Jen? Is it a Pim's cup?
No. Mine is an old-fashioned, a bourbon old-fashioned.
Drink. Good drink.
Yep.
Jess, 2-day-old Sauvignon Blanc for you.
Yes, that's my go-to. No, I'm a vodka martini.
Vodka
dry. Sorry, not dry. Dirty.
Okay. How dirty? Like completely, like just brine and
like medium. I would say sort of medium level because I like. Yeah. I like the flavor of the olive juice, but I want to still taste the rest of it.
Gotcha. And why vodka versus gin?
I don't know. I feel like this is a very strange thing to say, but I grew up on vodka. It's my family's roots were Ukrainian. So I think gin was really never introduced to me until like the last few years when I went to Ireland. And then I sort of explored that a bit more, but I've always had vodka martinis. I don't think I would hate a gin martini, but it's just not been in my repertoire.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Well.
Yes. Awesome.
Cheers to
thanks
that.
For joining
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
And I'm empty, so cheers.
Yeah, close.
as we crawl into the second hour of the show. Thanks so much, guys. I had a great time.
Don't worry, I'm a really good editor now.
If you love listening as much as we love sharing, click subscribe on our YouTube channel or find us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Thanks for listening.